the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco. This is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Nice to be live again in the grill room. So many of us have been, I still hear an audio sound here. Many of us have been sailing around the bay, and every now and then some of us go out that gate, and some of us have raced fast boats from here to Hawaii or from LA to Hawaii in the Pacific Cup or the Transpac, but nobody has won more of those races or had his yachts win more of those races than our speaker today. He started sailing as a young kid. At age 13, his family moved to Newport Beach, and as he said, he felt like a kid who'd moved into a candy store. Boats and water everywhere, and like some of us, he started as a Sea Scout and played in Sabots, and then got an old old Marine reject, an old naval reject from England, and won the Balboa beer can series with an old World War II rejected yacht. That's the way to start. By 71, he had designed a boat that we'll all remember, Chutzpah. It would go on to win the Transpac in corrected time only twice. And then he designed in 77 a boat that many of us loved and sailed on called Merlin. And that boat would set a record in 77 that would stand for 20 years. At the end of those 20 years, it was bested by a boat that, again, Bill Lee designed. So with that introduction, welcome Bill Lee. Come on up, Billy boy.
Well, it's great to be here today. Glad to see you all, and wonderful day, foggy day on San Francisco Bay. A little bit on the boat that I sailed in Sea Scouts, and you can look these up. It was designed by Uffa Fox. Uffa Fox, the famous international 14 designer and canoe racer, and its intent was to rescue sailors at sea. And it was a 27-foot cold molded plywood hull, or hot molded plywood hull, that was a perfect shape for a sailboat. And it was an open boat with a watertight bottom in it, and it had a dagger board and provided for sail, had a couple engines, had canopies. And the way the opening in the deck was, it would fit up under a B-17, and then they could drop it to down sailors at sea. And somehow, and you can look these up, it's an air-sea drop boat or something of that nature by Uffa Fox. And somehow our Sea Scouts in Newport Beach ended up with one of these things, and because it had a centerboard case, it was easy to make it in, and chain plates, it was easy to put a bigger rig on it and sail it. And I think we had a starboat rig on it once, and then it was a gaff rig catch once, and we just had a grand time with it, and I learned all kinds of stuff. And yes, we did win the Balboa Yacht Club Beer Can Series one year as Sea Scouts. So I've got a video here, and when you first look at the video, it looks like nothing's happening. But listen and watch, and you'll see one boat, and then you'll see another boat, and then you'll see something that I'm going to talk about next. Here we go. This is on the signal boat at the start of 2019 Transpac start on the signal boat. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's Merlin. That's Merlin. Not sure who that is, and then I want you to tell me who the next one is when it comes through. Okay, what was the last boat that came through? Comanche, you're right. And that was started 2019 Transpac. And Comanche was pretty interesting. Oh yeah, stand over. It was 100-footer, and the forestay only held the mast up. None of the sails forward of the mast attached to the forestay. None of the sails forward of the mast attached to the forestay. They were all this structured luff design where they just put lots and lots of carbon in the luff and then pull it really tight, and they don't need a forestay. And they'd go on halyard locks, and they'd be rolled up, and they'd all unroll. And watched them put one up once, and 100-foot boat, it's got 20 big guys on it, and they march this sail bag up to the foredeck, and they find the corners of this sail that's wrapped up, and then they've got these winch drums about this big around that are motorized. They're about this tall. They have great big self-tailers on them, and the guy wraps about 6 turns around it, puts it in the self-tailer, looks at it to make sure the halyard's on right. He stands back, and he pushes a button, and the electric winch cuts in, and the line comes off so fast you could never tail it. And it gets up 95% of the way, and then they slow it way down and keep it under control and get it on the halyard lock. And then they tension it from the deck. And every one of the sails forward of the mast was that way. And the other thing about boats like Comanche and boats like the trimarans we have going to Hawaii this summer is that they go so fast, they don't need spinnakers as we know it. The headsails forward of the mast are really just full Genoas. They don't even look or think like spinnakers. And, much like ice boats don't use spinnakers. Now, another interesting thing was how they do the man overboard on Comanche. And I was lucky enough to be a guest on board and see this process. But a 100-foot boat out in the ocean, 6-7 feet of freeboard, big waves. So how are you going to get a guy back on board? And they came up with this very different process. So you got this guy in the water, and you push the button on the GPS so you know where to come back to. And then one of the crew members is a designated rescue swimmer. Goes and gets suited up, wetsuit if he needs it. He's got a special harness, and he's got a reel that's 300 feet long of some 3/16 super strong Spectra line. And meanwhile, they get the sail down, which is a big job in itself. Actually, we didn't drop the sail that day, but they do get the boat back to the guy, and maybe 150 feet away, and the rescue swimmer, he ties one end of this Spectra line to the boat. Ties one end to himself, leaves the reel on the boat, jumps in the water, swims out to the guy in the water, grabs him. He's got a harness that's around him, and then he can put a line around the guy he's going to rescue, signals the boat, and they take one of these halyards that go with these super fast winches, bring it down and just clip it onto a loop in the line and start pulling. So it's an inverse 2-to-1, and it's pulling up this line, and it's pulling the guys closer to the boat. And when they get the guys close to the boat, they slow it down, get it under control, and pull them up on the boat. And saw it demonstrated, and it was quite interesting. And I'm not sure it would work for the rest of us, but it was a lot of preparation on Comanche's part, and they were able to do it quite well. Okay, so what's going on with Transpac this year? Let's see. How do I... Oh, okay. What's going on with Transpac? Okay. This is the basic Transpac website, transpacificyc.com or .org, whichever it is. And one of the things that's interesting for all you old timers is, come on, archives, is they have all of the race programs online. So you can go back through the history, and there's all the old race programs. So you can see when you sailed to Hawaii, or your father sailed to Hawaii, or your grandfather sailed to Hawaii. And then the part I'm really looking for, which you can also get to, see if I can get to it. Oh, there it went. Okay, this is the yellow brick tracker. And there's the mainland. There's the mainland. There's Hawaii, and every boat is issued a tracker, and it's just a little unit about yay big that sends a signal up. Oh, it's every 5 minutes or something, and the satellites pick it up, and so they know where the boats are. And one of the things they do, okay. Oh, it's way over right here. Way over there.
Okay. Oh, actually easier. Just press this button.
Oh, okay.
And you can try that.
There we go. Okay. I'm a Mac person, so these things are strange. Okay, so here's the boats that started yesterday, and the navigators in Transpac, they don't want to know where their competition is, so they get the race committee to put a 4-hour delay in this. So really the boats are about 4 hours ahead of these positions. And to me, there's a fault in that the racing rules now require, as part of the safety equipment, to have an AIS on board. Well, you ought to have that AIS on, and if you have it on, why do the trackers need a 4-hour delay? So we will talk about this for 2025. Oh, hey, we got Sweeta Coley winning her class. Yeah, going all of 8.1 knots. That's good. And then you got Makonda winning her class. It's a Beneteau 47.7. Good racer cruiser, 8 knots. And it probably also gives you 2,089 miles to the finish. And it may even have an ETA. And then three classes started yesterday. The third class is led by a Daler 46 named Wings. Now, if I can get this to work, we can turn on some wind. There's some wind. Okay, predict wind. You can either get windy or predict wind. And predict wind, if you go over the different arrows, it'll actually give you the wind speed where that arrow is. So this thinks you have 17 knots from the northwest, where the arrow is. Let's see what's happening at the bottom end of the course. No, it's lighter. It's only 16 knots down below where the boats are. Just to find yourself a little bit, there's Catalina Island, there is San Clemente Island, and there is San Nicolas Island. So that's kind of where you are here. But you can get to this tracker. You go to the Trans-Pacific website, you go find the yellow brick, click on, and it's quite clever. You can play the race backwards. which could be interesting if you wanted to, see who went where or see where you went or wherever. Okay, let's see. Okay. Okay, now I want to go back to the other link. How do I go back to the other link? That one? Nope. Oh, clear up there. Oh, okay. Oh, no, that's not. No, I did want. Yeah. No, I wanted to go back here because I was looking for something else in here. Aha, the entry list. Okay, Transpac is in 8 classes this year. They start them on 3 different days. They start the slowest boats, then the middle boats, and then the fastest boats. So the slowest boats started yesterday, the medium boats start tomorrow, and then the fastest boats start Saturday. And they don't put the division numbers in order here for whatever reason. Ask Yacht Scoring about that. The interesting classes are probably one class is entirely Santa Cruz 50s and Santa Cruz 52s, and that includes our Staff Commodore at St. Francis, Bill Dana, sailing the Pinball Wizard. Where's Bill? No, he's out racing.
When does he start?
He starts tomorrow. So go to the tracker and watch for Staff Commodore Dana to blow all their doors off. And in the old days, you just line up all the boats in order of rating and divide them into classes. Well, now you've kind of got, you got boats that won't surf, like Dorade, and then you've got lots of the boats built in the 80s that surf well but aren't true planing boats. And then starting around 95, started building true planing boats. And they're kind of like monohulls and catamarans to put the surfing boats and the planing boats together, because if it's light, the surfing boats are faster on handicap, and if it's windy, the planing boats are faster on handicap. So you're way dependent on what the weather is. So they also split the classes by put all the surfing boats together and put all the planing boats together. The planing boats, in the smaller planing boats, there's 4 J125s. And for those of you who want to go to Hawaii and go fast and feel the sensation of speed, you should get on a J125. And it's kind of like going to Hawaii on a 49er. Put on your foul weather gear and sit on the high side. The surfing boats tend to still have spinnaker poles. Need to pull the pole back a little bit. They don't have quite enough stability, and they aren't quite light enough to use a bowsprit only and no spinnaker pole, whereas the planing boats, for the most part, no spinnaker pole, reach them up a little more, big asymmetrical on a bowsprit. So that's kind of a difference. One very interesting entry this year, it's in the first start. It's a boat named Good Trouble. It's an Andrews 56, and it's being sailed by a diversity team. And they went and found a bunch of people that aren't like us. So do watch Good Trouble. Okay, so foiling is interesting these days, and how much foiling is allowed in Transpac. And, you know, as people develop foiling out in the ocean, boats that'll truly foil out in the ocean, should you even let them in Transpac? And they make, let's see if we can find these slides here. Okay, how do I get to my slides? Oh, there we go. Okay, so ORR decided, ORR runs the rating rule that runs Transpac, or rather, runs the rating rule that Transpac uses. They decided some time ago that the maximum foil lift they would allow would be enough to lift 33% of the weight of the boat. So you can, if the foiling system will lift more than 33% of the boat, it's an illegal boat for Transpac monohull. And this is at the best point of sail in the most wind. So 24 knots of wind, which is the most ORR uses, and the point of sail that the boat will get the most lift from the foil. If that number exceeds 33%, it's an illegal boat. So this picture up on the slide is a DSS boat, dynamic something stability. And there's a foil that slides out to leeward below the waterline. And you can see it's orange, and it's got a great big up arrow on it. So if this is a 20,000-pound boat, and the one boat that's entered in Transpac with this scheme is named Zeus. So keep an eye on Zeus, that's your DSS boat. And because of the DSS, it's thrown in with much bigger boats, because the DSS is really quite effective. And so they slide this board to leeward, and they can have up to 33% of the weight of the boat in what can be called negative crew weight. You know, instead of sitting guys on the high side, you simply take weight off the low side, even though there's none there. Or you can think of it as a sky hook that follows the boat along with this up to 33% of picking up on the low side. So that's going to do two things. It's going to make the boat lighter. It's going to float, you know, up to 33% higher. And it's going to add a lot of power to carry sail, because it's a great big lever out on the low side pushing up, you know, right when the boat's trying to heel. So this is the DSS boat. Zeus is the only one entered in Transpac. And we'll see how those guys do. I think it's an Infinity 51 is what they call it. Okay, now I need the skill to get to the next slide. That slide. Okay, here's another interesting foiling boat. It's not a foiling boat, a foil-assisted boat. It's a Beneteau Figaro 3. And the Figaro 2 was a water-ballasted boat, about a 33-foot boat. And the French just love these short-handed one-design boats. And so when they came out with the Figaro 3, instead of water ballast, they said, well, why don't we just use some retractable foils? So their foils are above the water line, stick out from the boat, and the windward one will be out of the water, and the leeward one will be in the water working. So this accomplishes the same thing that the DSS board does, that it's negative lift on the low side. So it's an increase in stability and make the boat lighter for Transpac purposes up to 33%. And this is a sister ship to a boat that I think carried the name Naos in, I think it was 2017 or 2019 Transpac. They didn't blow everybody's doors off, but it worked and it didn't break. And then let's see. Oh, what's this? Okay, I think this is a 40-footer, and this would be an illegal Transpac monohull. So you can see, can I walk over to the screen? Get it unstuck. Okay, you hear me? Yes. So they call these things Swiss Army knife boats. Swiss Army knife boats. And so you've got the canning keel here, the canning keel that swings to weather to move the ballast to weather. And then you've got two of these arms that have foils on them. The windward one, let's see, this would be the windward one, you would retract it, and then the leeward one would be working. And then you can't see it very well here. In fact, you can't see it at all, but if there were a rudder here, you would see a T-foil on the bottom of the rudder. And on the back of the T-foil, they put little elevators, just like the tail on an airplane. So between all this stuff, you have a fully foiling monohull. You know, what's it going to do bad out in the ocean? Pitch pole, you know, who knows? But if it can get more than 33% of the lift from foils, it would be an illegal Transpac boat, and this thing is intended to fully fly, so it would be an illegal boat. So go ahead and pop me to the next slide here. The fastest class in this year's Transpac is the Multihulls. And there's 3 Mod 70s. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Mod 70s, but they're French. They're extremely well developed for their purpose. You know, they just go 10 knots standing still. It's got a little doghouse there. Some of the pedestals are actually protected by the doghouse. The winches are outside the doghouse. Outside that, there's a steering station on each side, and the steering station will actually have a windscreen. And I asked Stan Honey one day, I said, can the autopilots steer better than people? And Stan says, a person can steer better until he can't see. And of course, that's what the spray shields are for, is so that you can keep seeing. This boat is fully foiling. In the multi-hull class in Transpac, full foiling is allowed. So you can have fully foiling boats. These rudders will have T-foils on the bottom again. Rather than the adjustable flaps, there's some hydraulic cylinders in here, and they can actually adjust the rake of the whole rudder, which in turn adjusts the rake of that T-foil. And same thing with this foil. There's a hydraulic cylinder in there where you can change the rake of it. And this foil, while you can't see it, well, it looks like maybe you can see a tip of it there, turns in, and then that creates the vertical lift. And then if you adjust the rake fore and aft, you'll determine how high the bows are going to ride. And in really smooth water, you can run the bows a little lower. In rough water, you have to run the bows a little higher. And rotating masts, and as I say, the French really have figured these out. And we were sailing Windjammer one year, and it was a good old-fashioned Windjammer year with a good northwesterly, and I was on a Santa Cruz 52, and we had the spinnaker pole back and had our shorts on and had a beer in our hand and having a grand time sailing the Windjammer. And it was the year that Lakota sailed, and that was Steve Fawcett's 60-foot trimaran. And they went by us outside, and they were close-hauled, no spinnaker. We had a spinnaker up. They were close-hauled, and everybody had foul weather gear on. So just almost the same course. We're pole back, spinnaker up. They're no spinnaker, sails in tight. So some interesting trophies. Transpac, more than most of these traditional offshore races, has had a big emphasis on first to finish. So what are the fastest times to Hawaii? What's the fastest anybody's gotten to Hawaii? Done with the slides. 4 days, 6 hours. And that was a 60-foot trimaran. In fact, it might have been Steve Fawcett's old boat. It was named, no, it wasn't. It was a different one. Mighty Merlot, 2017, 4 days, 6 hours. So that means all of the 2,225 miles from Los Angeles to Honolulu, they were eating a quarter of the course every day. Fully crewed. Fully crewed's actually got 2 branches in Transpac for course record. One of them, there's rules 51 and 52 in the racing rules of sailing, and one of them is you can't have power winches, and another one is you can't have movable ballast. So if you don't have a canning keel or water ballast or power winches, you can race for the Merlin trophy, which of course in 1977 didn't have power winches or canning keel or who knows what all. And that record is 6 days, 9 hours by Rio 100. Now the fully crewed allowing canning keels and power winches and water ballast is Comanche at 5 days, 2 hours. And then the single-handed record by our member Philippe Kahn is 7 days, 19 hours in an open 50. So that's kind of going fast to Hawaii. Transpac is sailed under the ORR rating rule. ORR is intended for rating a wide range of boats that tries to maximize participation, give everybody a chance. And ORR is very good for a wide range of boats. Transpac is considered using ORC, but ORC, only the boats that are most recently designed to ORC can win, so no need to do that. And that's what I got.
See, buddy. Wonderful bill.
Okay, no trick questions.
Fat chance. I want to recognize our staff commentator who's here today, Bruce Monroe. Bruce has raced Transpac and Pac Cup both. And we have 2 former chairmen of the board here, Mark McLaughlin and Carolyn Patrick. And there's only been one person in history that has chaired the Stag Cruise 5 times, so let's recognize Tommy Gilmore. Now let's see, hands in the air for people who've raced in Transpac. Hands in the air for people who race Pack Cup. Exactly. So that's your audience, buddy. So it's fun, Bill, to listen to the incredible fast rides that are now playing in the game, racing from here to Hawaii. But you were the one who kind of revolutionized boats that were optimized to race from here to Hawaii. And just so we've seen how the record has changed, remind us again, what was the record when you set it in Merlin, 6-foot boat in 1977? What was that record?
Well, there were two records to look at, and Windward Passage in 1971 had sailed the course in 9 days, 9 hours, and that seemed really fast. And then Eric Taberley with a trimaran, a couple of years later, had come along as an unofficial entry and sailed it in 8 days, 13 hours. And I remember writing the Windward Passage record on the wall when we were building the boat and saying, okay, we got to beat this. And Dave Wally came along and scratched it out and wrote 8 days, 13 hours, which was the unofficial Eric Taberley record. And our time was 8 days, 11 hours. And what was so interesting, we took 22 hours off the old record, but it was a really, really windy year, and Windward Passage in Kealoha finished about 12 hours behind us.
And those are considerably bigger boats.
Oh, way bigger boats, but when you're out in the surfing conditions, you know, it's the lightweight that's the big deal in relation to the waterline.
What's a crew size you like for a boat Merlin size?
We went with 8 in 77, and usually they're going with 9 these days.
And what's a watch system that you prefer with a crew that size?
What we did was, a couple ways we did it. When we went in 77, we did 3 guys on, 5 guys off, and then new man up every hour, and just rotated through that. When we went again on Merlin in 2017, we did 4 guys off, 4 guys on, and new guy up every 2 hours. Or I think we got 2 new guys up every 2 hours.
And when a person came on, how would he rotate on the positions?
Oh, it just, whatever. It was.
Did you let everybody drive?
Well, you let the good guys drive more.
Speaking of which, we have amongst us here Skip Stevely, a great bow guy who also can drive like crazy. When Skip was sailing on my boat Youngster one time, he's a great bow guy. I went forward to do something on the bow, and I gave Skip the helm. And when I was up there, I noticed the boat was going considerably faster. So I went back and said, Skip, get back up on the bow. Just kidding, but he is. You've seen so many great guys who could do both of these roles. Talk about a great crew member that you've had sail on Transpac boats that you've sailed across on.
Talk about a great crew member on Transpac boats.
Skip Allen, who else?
Well, I've never raced across with Skip. I'll tell you a great shipmate, and many of you know him as Malcolm Park.
Right.
And we built a boat named Panache for Rod Park for the 2003 Transpac and sailed, 1973 Transpac, raced it again with, in 1975, and Malcolm Park was 15. And he came with us, and he was a great shipmate.
So I remember one time we were going up the Delta in Merlin, and you said, come down below. You opened up on the nav table this big paper blueprint chart, and this before CAD was really being used much, and you showed me this big long lines, and you said, I think we're going to call it a Santa Cruz 70. So when you first took the lines of Merlin and made the 50, and then when did you start thinking about it? This was around 86 or 7. When did it came to you that maybe there should be, like something that we would ultimately call the Santa Cruz 70? How did that germ come into your brain?
Well, so let's see. 77, we set the record. We started sketching some bigger boats. Transpac did not have a rating limit for the 77 race nor the 79 race, nor the 81 race. And so you could easily build a bigger version of Merlin or whatever. And other major ocean races in the world had put in an IOR 70 limit, IOR 70 rating limit. And I remember that the 81 party at Kaneohe, Transpac party at Kaneohe, and Ben Mitchell Sr. was there. And he was very active with Transpac at the time. And he says, okay, you boat builders, we're going to make you guys rich. And I said, oh, wait a minute. Says, that's a pipe dream. Says, we're going to put it in an IOR 70 limit on the race. And I says, wait a minute, that means you can't build a bigger boat. Well, what it did mean was a whole lot of people built boats to the limit. And it was very quick to figure out that even though Windward Passage and Kealoha rated 70, that these little light boats that also were tweaked to rate 70 under the IOR were way faster on the Transpac course. And so, we built, 18 Santa Cruz 70s. Dennis Choate built a bunch of Andrews 70s. Nelson Merrick built a couple generations of Nelson Merrick 70s. There's Taxi Dancer. And there was 25 or 30 or more of these things built after Transpac put in the IOR 70 limit. So to his credit, Ben Mitchell Sr. was right. And the first year of the IOR 70 limit, the new boats were Saga, Charlie, and then Merlin was over-rating, and we had to tweak a lot to get Merlin down to rating. But at the 1985 race, these IOR 70 rated light boats just exploded.
We have a question from the back of the room. Great.
Nope. There you go. Hey, thanks for panache. And by the way, I like the kelp cutter on the keel. As a senior citizen with a career in tech, I did Tahiti and Hawaii in the 70s with a compass, a barometer, and a sextant. So I'd really like your opinion on really how you look at the technology. I got a 30-year career in tech. I understand everything that's going on with the routing software, and the downloads. But has this, in your opinion, taken away from something, or does it add to the experience? And the second question is how did Bill Lapworth contribute to your concept of design going forward?
Well, the first question, has modern navigation changed Transpac? And that's like, well, we used to all drive stick shifts. Now most of us drive automatic transmission. Did that change driving? The answer is yes. So yes, the modern technology has changed it. And I remember in 1975, 1977, we were relying on sun sights. It was before Loran, before any kind of satellite navigator. And it was quite a cloudy year. And we kind of didn't know where we were very accurately. And our navigator, Don Snyder, would say, if the sun comes out, call me. Wake me up. So the navigator was like a major job, and could keep one guy pretty busy, just figuring out where you are, with a little bit of where do you go. Now the navigator's job, you know where you are. You just look at the numbers on the screen, but you spend a whole lot more time trying to figure out where to go, because there's a whole lot more weather information. And speaking of weather information for Transpac, you're entitled to anything that's publicly available. And this is an interesting interpretation, that you can't have somebody broadcast you private weather information. And a comparison to this is you're racing on a lake and there's a flag on shore and it shows there's more wind over on the beach. That's legal information. Now, if you have your buddy develop some flag signals where if he drops the flag and put it up once, it means there's new wind, that's illegal because the whole fleet doesn't know the code. So same thing for weather information on board. You can have anything that's publicly available, but you can't have private forecast customized for you.
So many of us have seen what happens to you around 6 o'clock in a racing environment, and you turn into a wizard. Where did that nickname come from, and where did you get the costume?
The costume showed up at the finish of 77 Transpac, and the hat, actually, Gordy Nash, you all know Gordy Nash, Don Goring had a party at his sail loft, and Gordy Nash sewed up that wizard hat and gave it to me. And that was 73, and then 77, somebody produced the robe that had been used in a play, I think. And it was going in the garbage, and somebody grabbed it and pulled it out, and I know what to do with this.
So you're saying the name came after the hat? Somebody put the hat, gave you the hat, but you had to dream. You had to say, "Okay, I'm going to put this hat on." Where did the name come from? Where did people start going to the wizard? I'm
not sure, but it was well established by 77 because we put a wizard hat on the mainsail.
So now, those of us who sailed in Mod 70s will tell you that the apparent wind is so strong, you want to be behind the shield, but you got to move around on the boat. And so the aero packages on these new racing foiling and super high-speed boats are an important component of the whole deal. In the AC out here, we saw lots of attention to the aero. The faster the boat's going, the more the apparent wind goes forward, and higher the apparent wind is, of course, and the more the aero package counts. So on boats like Maserati, these super high-fast creatures that are going 25, 30, in steady streams, talk to us a little bit about the aero packages on those kind of boats.
The aero package being
basically it's like the canopy over the bow of the boat and over the gear. They're paying all kinds of attention to having good aerodynamics. They don't want any turbulence on the surface of the boat anymore. Before we didn't care about turbulence on the decks, but now these boats are going with apparent wind of 40 and 50 and stuff like that. So they've got real important aerodynamic issues on the deck.
That's correct, and here's a subset of it that's kind of interesting. Traditionally, you sail a boat from up on deck, and some of the later versions, at least one of the later versions of these big trimarans rather, have actually put the crew on a floor a foot above the water line, but otherwise essentially protected by a cabin.
Hard Dodgers, right?
It's a pretty sophisticated hard Dodger with kind of hatches you can open up and look out, and then all the winches are in there and everything. And there's controversy on a couple fronts on this. One, is it really safe? And the other is it really sailing? You're supposed to sail a boat from up on deck. So that's been controversial.
Where do you stand on that issue? Stan mentioned that last Wednesday. Where do you stand on crew up on deck or crew isolated like submarines? I didn't set up the question, did I?
Well, the 12 meters went through it. And was it around 64 when they put all the grinders down below deck?
Right.
And then just had 3 guys up on deck, and then they stepped in the next year and says, "No, you guys are going to sail the boat from on deck." Right. There's a practical reason on these multi-hulls is that you're sailing them 24 hours a day through cold weather, hot weather, everything else. It is more, comfortable for the crew, and then it's a completely different kind of sailing. So, whether you let the boats change with the kind of sailing you're doing, or whether you go traditional and say, nope, you got to sail the boats on deck, I'd argue that you need to sail the boats on deck, and that you can build good spray shields and lots of good stuff, but to fully have them down below, to me, kind of defeats the purpose. Now, there's a related piece of that that's interesting, and that is go back to not being able to get private weather information. That, you can take the best navigator in the world with you, and he can use the public information and figure out where to go, but you can't have somebody on shore feeding you weather information. Well, these big trimarans in some races, they've been allowing onshore navigators.
Routers. Exactly. Go ahead.
So the navigator's not on the boat. And talk to Stan about this. He's done it. And he's in a room with computer screens and, plenty of electricity and really, really good connections. And I was talking to him on the phone when I called him one day. I didn't know where he was. He says, I'm in France navigating something.
Route to Rhone or something.
And I said, now is now a good time to talk? And he says, yeah, we got about an hour before we have to jibe.
Here in the basement.
and so here he was navigating this boat, sitting in an air-conditioned room with, plenty of power, reliable connectivity. He said that the things that were missing was you couldn't look at the waves and you couldn't look at the sky. So you couldn't use those two things to say, hey, are we doing the right thing?
Speaking of super high-speed machines, how about Chine Bottom Mercury's built in the 50s? We've got a question from Jim Bradley. Jim?
Bill, this is not really a Transpac question, but most of us have raced on or against Santa Cruz boats. Could you give us a quick history or generation by generation of the boats you've had since you arrived in Santa Cruz many long years ago?
Great question, Jim.
Well, I built myself a 42-foot plywood boat that was around here on the bay just a little bit around 66, 67. And then I moved to Santa Cruz in 68, built myself a 30-footer named Magic that we raced in the Mora long-distance race from San Francisco down
Midget Ocean Racing Association.
Yeah.
Right. Mora.
Yeah, it allowed up to 31 feet, I think, and raced that boat from San Francisco down to Ensenada, got the first to finish. And there were a lot of boats, and I remember being at the skipper's meeting here at the club, and they had the trophies, and there was like a nice hand-bearing compass and a nice pair of binoculars and a nice something else, and the fourth place trophy was a tin horn. Well, these people look at Magic and Starbuck and Grendel, and then here's another 20, 25 boats, and they're all racing for the tin horn. They figured that out real fast.
Now I'm going to keep asking questions, but if you've got a question from the audience, put your hand up.
Well, let me go. Let me go on.
Right.
So then I sailed with Art Beal. Do any of you remember Art Beal?
I do.
Art Beal, the guy with the 27 doctorate degrees.
Right. Not nerdy enough.
He had bought a Cal 28 from Wayne Coker, and he was racing the series outside here, whatever it is. It's the Danforth series.
Danforth series.
And he had a Cal 28, and he had put hiking boards hanging out over the top sides, and he had his crew sitting outside the lifelines on these hiking boards. But anyway, he owned a Cal 37, which was a Cal 40 cutoff, and I sailed to Hawaii with him in 1971, which was the first Transpac I sailed. And then from there, we agreed to build him a new Transpac boat. And we built Witchcraft and Chutzpah and Panache all in the same year. Witchcraft and Chutzpah being near sister ships. And Artie wasn't very happy because it was the sister ship Chutzpah that won. in '73. But from there, we went on and built Santa Cruz 27s, and even that's a good story. The guy calls up, he's from Santa Barbara, and he says, "Yeah, we got quarter tonners going on down here in Santa Barbara. I want a quarter tonner, kind of like Chutzpah." And we drew up this funny little fat thing that was 9 feet long and 24 feet, or 9 feet wide and 24 feet long, and had pinched ends in the back, and kind of the IOR deal that rated in under the IOR for a quarter tonner. And we got it drawn up, and we put a price on it, and he says, "Well, this quarter tonner racing isn't working very well. The one boat wins all the time, and everybody else is going home. I really want to be first to the bar, but I don't have any more money." So he said, "Okay, well, we can take the same sail plan, the same keel, and instead of making the boat 9 feet wide, we'll make it 8 feet wide. And instead of making it 24 feet long, we'll make it 27 feet long, and we'll just, make something speedier out of the same quarter tonner parts." And then that became the first Santa Cruz 27.
Amazing. What a venerable design, too, Bill. Santa Cruz 27s.
And then we didn't sell any more of them after his, but we had built a set of molds, and we built them for ourselves. I built one. George Olson and Dennis Bassano built one. Paul Daniels built one. 3 or 4 other people built them. John Humphreys built one. And finally, at boat number 7, we sold one to somebody. And it was a guy named Mel Wills, and he named it Giant Killer. And then they had a windy year to Ensenada, and he surfed past some Cal 40, and then we started getting orders.
In the last 3-bridge fiasco, I don't know how many 27s are out there, but 20-something, maybe 30. They're such a great, venerable design. So fun to hear about the birth of that class. We have another question from Jim. Okay, over here we have a question. Skip Stevely has a question.
I was just going to say on the 77 Merlin finish, I remember a 11:01:46. I mean, that was
Yeah.
for the time.
Yeah, 8 minutes.
To the second, because we were always watching that. I just want to say on Merlin that before we started doing all this stuff, down below he had the windows there, and it had been a very high dining room table. And in every 70 and stuff, you sail and you go down a wave. The way the bow's shaped, you go down and you just kind of plow. And with Merlin, the bow was straight up and down. So when you were plugged into a wave, you just went right through the wave. And the most phenomenal thing is to be sitting at the dinner table and the water just going right by us. It's my favorite boat.
Yes.
Question over here.
Getting back to the question of planing versus surfing boats.
Yes.
And so in this year's Transpac, we obviously have the Santa Cruz's got their own, right? The 50s, 52s, and the J125s are in a different class. So they're not going head to head. So that's all separated. But that doesn't always happen. There aren't always enough boats to separate them. Last year's Pac Cup, for example, Santa Cruz 50 and 52 versus J125s. My question is, do you think there's a way to make this work so that is there a rating modification or something that we can do to keep those older boats, keep the two classes competitive and actually equal out, or do they just need to be separate?
Did Stan talk about this last week, or were you here last week?
I wasn't here last week.
Talk about it anyway. Go ahead.
Okay, so Stan has proposed a scoring system that's become possible with the better weather information. And what you do is you take expedition, and then you take the projected weather to Hawaii, and then you route each boat, and then how well you do is compared to how you sailed in accordance with what the system thought, and that could do some of this, because the inconsistency with the surfing boats and the planing boats has to do with how much wind you get. And I don't know whether this system is proposed to update each day with new information or not. I'd have to ask Stan where it stands. Stan and Alan Andrews are way up on it. But that is one thought on the problem, because Transpac has stayed away from any indeterminate scoring. You know your rating before the start, and no matter what the conditions are, your rating doesn't change. A lot of people really like that, but if the weather conditions aren't what the ratings were based on, then the ratings aren't right. So either luck is part of sailboat racing, or you need a better system, one of the two.
Well, Bill Lee, thanks for sharing your insights and your wizardry with the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Thank you so much, buddy.
Okay. See, no trick questions.
Good going, bud, as usual.
Sure.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.